So, The Simpsons just killed off one of their oldest side characters, which, whilst not seeming to be a huge deal to me, seems to be picking up steam in news outlets. And that, once again, reopens a question to me that's maybe a little controversial, but it's been a long time now. Is it time that The Simpsons died with him? I'm not saying they need an unceremonious cull them over and let them whimper to death. And certainly don't misinterpret me as saying that they should actually kill off the Simpsons family themselves. That'd be an awful way to end a 35-year run. However, with the series now only 5 years away from its 40th anniversary, when is it time to retire the series? The character in question who's recently been canonically killed is Larry... how the hell do I pronounce that? Is Larry Dalrymple. Or was called, I guess. Who's been a regular at Moe's Tavern ever since the debut season back in 1989. Now, I personally can't particularly remember an episode where he's ever said anything too substantial, but with over 35 years of canon, I'm sure there's probably 3 episodes completely revolving around him for all I know. As far as I'm concerned, as a general outsider to The Simpsons, he's very much the definition of a background character, and that's okay. If anything, I'm a little surprised this is as big a deal as it is, as I'm pretty sure characters with more prominent roles in the series have seemingly died and just appeared a couple episodes later, undeterred. I mean, that one old guy got run over by Homer in the movie, and that definitely wasn't the first time I'd seen him in a fatal situation. I guess some people are made of more cartoony plasticine than others. Unless you're Maud Flanders, of course, death has otherwise never really been a canonically enforced part of The Simpsons. Mr. Burns alone has gotten over several near-death experiences, even when he was shot and it was a mainline plot point. The only other time I can really remember was when Marcia Wallace, the voice of Mrs. Krappable, died in 2013. Whilst not overtly done on screen, there are a few subtle implications of Krappable's passing in later episodes. Whilst most of these seemed more of a tribute to the late actress, there was one interesting time they brought her back as a ghost alongside Maud Flanders. Anyway, now we have this guy. A side character of a side character of a side character's death is now a plotline in The Simpsons worth making news about. And we're fully running with it. And that leads me to question, shouldn't we wrap this all up soon? I know people think that that's something that should have happened around the early 2000s, despite the subsequent 20 years of additional content they've since got. However, we learned a long time ago that they weren't killing off this show that easily. It's like I've said about SpongeBob before, it just makes too much money to shut it down. So we know well that so long as they can do it, they will do it. However, with this recent character death reminding me of the Mrs. Krappable situation, it raises a completely different argument for ending this show. The tragic passing of Marcia Wallace was all the way back in 2013, and we have since had an additional 11 years of Simpsons episodes with otherwise the same core voice cast. This is a cast who are now 35 years older than they were in 1989, and my suggestion would be that it would be nice to end this series whilst everyone's still able to do it. Already, audiences are pointing out that clearly Julie Kavner, now in her early 70s, doesn't have as easy a time with Marge's voice as she used to. I'm not saying that the cast are at an age where they're all on the verge of dropping off, but we also don't need to wait until that point to end the show either. This cast has given joy to so many of us for so long now that they all deserve to see the finale of this mammoth series at an age where they can happily wave goodbye to it and celebrate that. We've already had cast members who will never get to see that. I'm just getting increasingly concerned at the longevity of this series as it gets close to pushing past 40 years and having to end under tragic circumstances, or worse, push on with a whole new voice cast. Let's make sure the end of this record-breaking run is a positive one that can genuinely be celebrated. Because yes, I've also heard counterpoints that in recent years, the Simpsons series has gotten good again, like the latest couple of seasons have actually been real stellar. There's an Edinburgh Fringe joke chucked in there recently that I can certainly enjoy as a participator every year. And there is some validity to that, but if you aren't going to consider the arguments of running out of steam and ideas for the series from a quality perspective, then maybe something more akin to the realism of such a long run is something worth thinking about. Hey, before we continue, just gonna do a quick plug to subscribe if you're new to this channel. Let us know your thoughts, agreements, and counter-arguments on the YouTube comments or on our Discord server, and I shall let you get back to the rest of the video. Thank you very much for making it halfway. I appreciate you. But even still, the fact that the show's at a point where it can only really now repeat itself, especially with such a limited cast, it's to the point that all sorts of us from the general audience have just kinda tapped out. In fact, I had no doubt that there's a bulk of The Simpsons viewership that, instead of watching any of the new stuff, just throw on the classic 90s episodes on Disney+. I'm afraid I don't remember who said this, but a really good argument I saw from one YouTuber compared The Simpsons legacy to another 90s sitcom, Friends. To this day, no one questions that Friends is still an enduring success. Streaming services earn by the bucket load for just the broadcast rights to this day. It still makes so much money on merch alone, and by God, I wish I was one of the credited musicians on that theme song. Its legacy is cemented as an icon of the 90s and still makes money, and yet it ended 20 years ago. The argument this YouTuber made, and I'll credit them below once I work out who they are, made the point that The Simpsons would have also held that legacy if it had called it a day after a similar time period. Imagine how goated The Simpsons would be now if it got to around 2001 and they ended the series, or it was the mainline movie that was the official ending. All the classic episodes would still be in circulation today. The bidding wars seen over Friends and the US office now would have also likely been even higher for The Simpsons. And yes, I'm sure The Simpsons is still a cash cow in its continuation, but dare I say it would have been more valuable if they'd done it this way instead. Many people believe, myself included, that The Simpsons movie should have been the endpoint, as even back in 2007, its reputation had started to wane, but was still before the point where they continued making it for a further 17 years. That's how far away we are now from the movie, by the way, and the show is still going. The writing may well be decent nowadays, but it's just not fresh anymore. It will always be heralded as the start of the adult animation boom, but that start being a couple generations ago now, that makes it the granddad of the group. It only gets more confusing when you see the retcons they introduced, like the fact that Homer was brought up in the 90s after a certain point in the series in order to account for the new generations watching The Simpsons trying to relate to Homer. Weirdly, whilst we've had some newer wave hits like Rick and Morty and Bob's Burgers come along later, a lot of adult animation mainstays haven't really changed since the 1990s in general. South Park, Family Guy, American Dad, The Simpsons, hell, even Futurama's being resuscitated once again. Pretty soon, a bunch of these will be beyond 30 years old. So, deep breath, how can they turn this around? How do we end The Simpsons? Well, to me, the clue was in what I said a moment ago. Bring out the second movie. Make the Simpsons sequel movie and be done with it. Use its final status as the marketing ploy for audiences. You now have the Disney marketing department behind it to really go out with a bang. This is the perfect way to end for the cast and crew, the general audience, and the money bags mouse house. Have a big, large-scale theatrical event to say, this is the finale of The Simpsons. A 40-year legacy, brilliant all across the board in certain wanes of quality, success, and iconography. The Simpsons sequel, a billion-dollar movie, and I'm calling it now. A big premiere event with a long yellow carpet, have the cast come out together one last time. Give the movie a big emotional story resolving long-standing character flaws and issues, and have us all crying by the end of it. Whether it is a future look into their future as a family, as much as they've done that multiple times across multiple timelines, but maybe give us a definitive this was the true answer, just to put it at a full stop. Why not? Full on make this the Avengers Endgame of The Simpsons. Let's do it, it's fine. Be the event of the summer, get the crowds cheering, ride The Simpsons off into the sunset, and then shut the thing down. In a way that is narratively, emotionally, and culturally significant and satisfying. We've had a hell of a long ride with America's first family, and it would be an awesome thing to be able to say goodbye to them properly. Or at least, that was just a thought I had looking at this whole thing from a news bulletin of a mild background character being killed canonically. Maybe it'll be they'll go on for another 20 years and slowly cut off the characters every few to keep it going. Maybe this is a contentious point and I'm happy to see all sorts of arguments. Let us know in the YouTube comments down below or on our Discord server. But for now, I'll end it off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this little ramble, and I shall see you in a little bit.